Welcome back to the channel. I have a new book here to talk about. This one is relatively recent as far as publications go. I can double check on that. I didn't actually check on that beforehand, but this didn't pop up on my radar when I was reading November publication, November 2021. So just last year, very, very recent. Anyway, let's get into it. So Sherlock Holmes and Count Dracula by Christian Claver, I want to say. Again, I'm sorry if I butcher your name. I want to come back to the blurb on the cover. An exuberant, reverent mashup, says James Lovegrove. I'm not sure who James Lovegrove is, but maybe I should look that up. Anyway, it's hard to find anyone in our day and age that does not know who Sherlock Holmes and Count Dracula are. Sherlock Holmes comes from the books of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Sherlock Holmes was so popular at the time that Arthur Conan Doyle was writing that he actually killed Sherlock Holmes off because he was tired of writing the books and just didn't want to deal with it anymore. But there was so much demand for Sherlock Holmes to return that he basically retconned. It may be the first instance of a retcon in history. He retconned Sherlock Holmes' death in order to bring him back to life so that he would be able to keep writing the Sherlock Holmes novels. There was that much demand for it. In fact, there is so much demand for it still that they basically created Sherlock Holmes' house on Baker Street. It didn't exist before. It was never a place. And now they have 221B Baker Street in London where you can go and see Sherlock Holmes' house. Yeah, it's nuts. It reminds me of another thing. So Romeo and Juliet, supposedly from Verona, Italy. There is a... Romeo was the Montague, Juliet was the Capulet. There is a Capulet house in Verona. It does not have a balcony. Well, it has a balcony now, but it didn't originally have a balcony. They took the balcony off another building that they thought, this looks really nice, and threw it on the Capulet house so that could be Juliet's balcony. Yeah, people do crazy stuff. Anyway, Count Dracula... immortalized by Bram Stoker in his tale, Dracula. And this is a mashup between Sherlock Holmes from Doyle and Count Dracula from Bram Stoker. It actually has some of the same characters from both novels. From Dracula and then from the Sherlock Holmes series. So Dracula shows up in London, and he explains to Holmes why he is there, and ends up allying himself with Sherlock Holmes and Watson. I'm trying to think, because there's some things about that I want to talk about later, and there's some things I want to talk about now, but okay. Basically, Count Dracula was lured to London. He had previously, during the Bram Stoker incident that was written about by Bram Stoker, he had determined to leave London and never come back. As it was, he was lured back to London, and in so doing, an attempt was made on his life. He was able to escape that attempt, and he was able to then ally himself with Sherlock Holmes and attempt to thwart those who had tried to make an attempt on his life. There are a couple cases in the book, but they all tie back to this initial interaction with Count Dracula. You come to find out that through the interactions of Count Dracula and Sherlock Holmes that there is a common enemy between the two of them. Someone who is actively trying to stymie both, because at least Sherlock Holmes feels that the efforts, since they are directed at him and Dracula, both he and Dracula have the ability to stymie his plans, and so he is trying to do his best to hinder Sherlock Holmes and Dracula at the same time. However, because of this, you have and you find out that the alias of this person who is attempting to foil them is called the Mariner Priest. Now, it doesn't really the name doesn't really make sense because Dracula believes that the Mariner Priest is a vampire, and vampires don't do well in water. One of the things that happens is Dracula's ship when it arrives in London and docks, it gets set on fire, and he has to jump into the Thames and swim. And he says that almost kills him, just being in the water. So this Mariner Priest, which is a sailor and a priest at the same time, two things that don't really, the religious iconography, and then the fact that the water just doesn't, in my mind, wash. Anyway, going on. They had managed to foil the first attempt, and it's basically at that point case closed, and they move on to the next case and the next case. But they all basically tie back to this Mariner Priest who is trying to do his best to get in their way, to impede them, and to at the end destroy them. Let me get now into kind of my reaction. I feel that Christian Claver is a very, very good writer. The action, or the prose was very good. It wasn't overly flowery. It felt pretty good from what I've read of Bram Stoker, and from what I've read of... I have read all of the Sherlock Holmes novels and short stories that were written by Conan Doyle. And I did get a sense that I was dealing with Holmes, with Watson. There were some things about their characterization and their personalities that I don't think quite lined up with the original novels, but they were like, instead of being completely different, it was just like the characterization was slightly different. And it could be that the reason it was slightly different is because of Christian Claver's take on Sherlock Holmes. That was what he read into it. That's how he perceived him to be. And so that's fine. For the most part, I enjoyed the interaction between Holmes and Watson, and I didn't feel that those little tiny things were a big deal. However, and this is a big however, I would not recommend this book to anyone. I hated it. Absolutely detested it. I slogged it through to the end to find out how it was going to end, but I hated this book. I did not like it. And like I said, The writing was excellent. The guy has a talent for writing, but this book sucked. I hated it that much. And this James Lovegrove, I don't know where he comes off calling this a reverent mashup. It is in no way, shape, or form a reverent mashup. Basically, it seems that the only reverence he had was for Sherlock Holmes himself. Everything else was fair game. I could tell within the first... I had inklings in the first chapter, but by the second chapter, I'd have to double check. But basically, this starts out with Watson reminiscing. And he's saying that now that Sherlock Holmes actually is dead, I can tell this to the world. I wouldn't do it because Sherlock Holmes didn't want this published before he died. And that kind of gave me an inkling here. But in the first few chapters, you could tell that Watson was going to be turned into a vampire, and he was. Spoiler alert, but I don't want people to read this. It's garbage. Watson gets turned into a vampire. The thing is that Watson is of such moral character and fortitude that he would never think about feeding from a person, from a human being. And he doesn't. He drinks chicken blood and goat blood the rest of the book. When he meets Dracula, when Sherlock Holmes and Watson meet Dracula, Dracula basically says that everything that was in Bram Stoker's account of what happened was a lie, a fabrication. None of it happened. I mean, how is that a reverent mashup? When basically they said Dracula came in. Yes, he was in England, but he was the persecuted one in this case. He was persecuted by Van Helsing and the others who were, just on Van Helsing's team. He married Mina Harker. Mina Harker, who, if you read Bram Stoker's Dracula, you will know from, you would know that Mina was not in any way, shape, or form in love with Dracula. She wasn't. She was in love with her husband Jonathan and wanted to marry him. But no, there's this narrative that I think may have been introduced by the Gary Oldham, Keanu Reeves Dracula movie that was horrible, where Mina was almost in love with Dracula. And, no, that was stupid. That should not have even been a part of the book. Dracula was obsessed with Mina Harker and wanted her for himself, not the other way around. And so Mina Harker, the reason that Sherlock Holmes and Count Dracula team up is because Mina is kidnapped when they get to London on the attempt on Dracula's life. And again, this is spoilers, but there's a couple things before I go into the spoiler. I think some of the book kind of lost itself. So we had the first instance where Dracula teams up with Holmes initially because Mina gets kidnapped. Don't get me started. And in the second case, you could tell it was going Cthulhu. And it did. They had the Innsmouth, which is reference from H.P. Lovecraft. So they started mashing up other stuff into this that was not Count Dracula. And it just kind of, at that point, it was like, what? Why are we shifting from vampires now to Cthulhu? Where did this come from? And then in the last chapter, or not last chapter, in the last section of the book, you get back to vampires because you find out who the Mariner Priest is. Now, this is where the spoilers come in. The Mariner Priest is Moriarty. Yeah, it's not even a new villain. It's Moriarty. Moriarty, who died at Reichenbach Falls, didn't actually die because he was in the process of being converted to a vampire. And so instead of dying at Reichenbach Falls, which has water, and if he landed in the water, he totally would have drowned, because that is apparently a weakness of vampires. So whatever. But anyway, Moriarty manages to survive Reichenbach Falls, and he comes back later, and yeah, it's just stupid. It's lazy writing at that point. And the thing is that on top of like them, on top of the fact that Dracula is now a misunderstood good guy, basically he switches the he basically not only calls Bram Stoker's tale a lie, but it turns out that basically all the good guys from Bram Stoker's Dracula are actually the bad guys. Because you have at least 2 characters from Bram Stoker that turn up to try to kill Dracula and Holmes, and I don't remember off the top of my head which ones they were. One was the American, and I forget the other one. But they nearly succeed in killing Holmes, and yeah, it's just so bad. It's not a reverent mashup at all. It's an irreverent mashup, and not irreverent in the ha ha ha. This is so funny. This. They have no reverence at all for the source material, except for the character of Holmes. He cannot be touched. He remains human through the whole ordeal. And ordeal is on my part. But Watson, not only is Watson turned into a vampire, his wife is turned into a vampire, and Watson, being of such good character that he comes through unscathed and retains his moral character and his personality, his wife goes off the deep end. Yes, his wife died, and he moves back in with Holmes after his wife's death, but basically, Watson had to kill his own wife for this garbage. Yeah, he sets her on fire to kill her because she was part of Moriarty's plan. Moriarty was the one who turned her in the first place so that he could have revenge on Holmes. This is so garbage. Just let Moriarty die and be dead, and come up with a credible threat to both Holmes and Dracula, and give us a good book that actually marries Sherlock Holmes with Count Dracula in a reverent way that respects the vision of both authors. The thing is that I don't mind the fact that, like, at the end of Bram Stoker's Dracula is killed, and then he would come back for this. I don't mind that. That's fine. To me, that's fine. That's like, he dies, but vampires can somehow wiggle out, and maybe somebody brought him back, what have you. He had a loyal retainer in Renfield, and Renfield, yeah, I don't remember if Renfield died or not, but anyway, he is able to resurrect Dracula, and Dracula comes back, and I don't mind that. But this schlock, it was garbage. Somebody should have pointed this out to him before he released this direct. The other thing I hate about this is that Dracula is not a mystical, supernatural vampire. I hate that. He's just sick. Yeah, he has a blood disease, and that gives him the vampiric abilities to grow his incisors when he gets mad, and to be super strong and super fast, and be burst into flames in the sun, and live forever. It's all due to a blood disease. Yeah, Dracula's greatest weakness is an antibiotic. Garbage. Dracula should be a supernatural threat. He should be, afraid of crosses and stuff. Basically, the only reason they give for vampires being afraid of crosses in this garbage is that they're made out of silver, and silver poisons them. So they're not afraid of crosses. They're just leery of them because they might be made out of silver. Don't read this. This is a horrible book. Don't read it at all. If Christian Claver has other stuff that is not Sherlock Holmes and Dracula, because this says The Classified Dossier Volume 1, I will not be reading any more in this series. But if he has other stuff, read that, because that might actually be good, because he is a talented writer, but this is crap. Don't read it. That's it for today. Let me know what you thought, because if you see something different that I don't, please let me know. If you've read this and you thought this was great, again, let me know. I want to hear about it. I don't know that I'll agree with you, but I want to hear about it. So like, subscribe, put the bell on so you get notifications, comment down below, and enjoy what you're reading.